My dad called me the disgrace at the Mardell family reunion, right in front of cousins, neighbors, church ladies, children eating cherry snow cones, and every person who had spent 9 years believing I stole from my own grandfather. The microphone squealed before he said it, like even the old speaker wanted to warn him. He stood under the cedar beams of the reunion pavilion in Brackenridge Falls, Tennessee, one hand around a sweating glass of sweet tea, the other pointing toward the long table where my name card had been placed at the very end, far enough away to remind me I was family only when it was convenient. My name is Tressa Mardell. I was 35 years old that summer, and by the time the sun dropped behind the ridge, everyone who had called me a thief would learn that the real theft had been sitting at the head table all along. My father thought the reunion was his stage. He thought Grandpa Bramwell's name belonged to him. He thought the dead could not correct the living. Then I walked to the podium with one folded letter, one small brass key, and 9 years of silence in my hands. Before he opened that letter, the whole place looked harmless. That is how family lies survive. They dress themselves in potato salad, old songs, paper fans from the funeral home, and children running barefoot near a creek. The Mardell family reunion pavilion sat on the edge of Kestrel Creek, just outside Brackenridge Falls, where the Appalachian hills fold soft and blue around the roads. Grandpa Bramwell had helped build that pavilion with his own hands before I was born. He was a mason, a measuring man, a man who believed every beam had to be true because a crooked beam could hold a roof for a while, but sooner or later, weight told the truth. He used to say that to me when I was small and followed him around with a pencil tucked behind my ear, pretending I knew what a level line meant. That pavilion was his pride. Every summer, the family gathered there under faded red, white, and blue bunting. Every summer, my father, Royston Mardell, took the microphone and talked about roots, honor, and the Mardell name. And every summer for 9 years, my absence had been explained with one clean sentence. Tressa ruined her grandfather's heart and ran when the family needed her most. Welcome back to Revenge Stories, where quiet people do not always raise their voice. Sometimes they wait until the right words are read aloud by the right witness. If you have ever been blamed because someone louder needed a place to hide their guilt, stay with me. This is not a story about revenge the way my father would tell it. It is not about grabbing money, burning bridges for pleasure, or making a scene because pain needed an audience. This is a story about a letter my grandfather wrote before he died, a family education fund that was drained and rebuilt in the dark, and the day my father used the word disgrace one time too many. I drove from Nashville to Brackenridge Falls that morning with my work phone turned off and Grandpa's old pocket level in the cup holder. I keep it there when I know I am walking into a place where people will try to tilt the floor under me. My job is not glamorous. I work as a forensic claims investigator for a company that handles insurance disputes, missing records, forged signatures, and the quiet kind of fraud people commit when they are sure no one will read the small print. I spend my days comparing dates, signatures, ink patterns, bank records, photographs, repair estimates, and stories that almost match the truth but not quite. People think fraud looks dramatic. It usually looks ordinary. A form signed on a Tuesday by someone who was in the hospital that day. A receipt with the wrong tax number. A check memo that says repair when it really means debt. I learned that work because I was good at noticing what did not line up, and maybe because my own family had trained me to study silence like evidence. The reunion banner was already hanging when I pulled into the gravel lot. Mardell Family Reunion, 43rd year. Someone had painted tiny mason jars on the corners, a little tribute to Grandpa because he used to save every nail and washer in glass jars labeled in his square block handwriting. Trucks were parked under the sycamores. Folding chairs lined the grass. A long table held casseroles with masking tape names on the lids, trays of fried chicken, deviled eggs dusted orange with paprika, and a sheet cake with Grandpa's face printed in frosting because my father had decided this year would be a special memorial for him. He had been dead 9 years, but my father liked grief best when it could be organized around himself. I parked at the back, where I always parked, far enough away to leave without making anyone move their vehicle. It is strange what your body remembers. A table where no one saves you a seat. A room where people stop talking when you enter. The old feeling of being allowed to stand near your own blood, but not among them. I looked toward the pavilion and saw my father laughing with a group of men from his church. Clean white shirt tucked into pressed jeans, silver hair combed back, jaw strong in the way proud men train their faces to look honest. My brother Kellen stood beside him, taller, broader, wearing the easy grin he used when he needed someone to forget he had failed at something. Kellen's wife, Waverly, moved through the crowd with a clipboard and a smile so polished it looked laminated. My mother, Nerissa, sat near the fans with Aunt Bettine Crowell, her hands folded around a paper cup, eyes down like she had already decided not to see whatever might happen. Waverly noticed me first. She had always been good at spotting a problem before it reached the table. She came toward me in a pale yellow sundress, earrings shaped like little leaves, smile warm enough for anyone watching and cold enough for me to understand. "Tressa," she said, "you came." Not "we're glad," not "it's been too long," just "you came," as if I had shown up at a locked door with the wrong key. I said, "It's a family reunion." She glanced toward the pavilion. "Of course. Well, your name card is down near the end. We kept the front for elders and fund committee people." Fund committee people. I almost smiled. My father had a way of making exclusion sound like organization. I thanked her and carried my small dish of peach cobbler to the dessert table because I had been raised to bring something even to places that did not want me. The Bramwell Mardell Education Fund had been the cleanest thing in our family once. Grandpa started it with money from a stonework contract he completed after his knees were already bad. It was not huge at first, just enough to help Mardell grandchildren and a few local trade school students buy books, tools, welding gloves, nursing scrubs, whatever kept them from quitting. Grandpa never went to college, but he believed skill deserved a bridge. He kept the fund ledger himself in a blue cloth-bound book, every donation and every scholarship written in black ink, straight as fence wire. When I was 16, he let me add up the columns. When I was 20, he told me I had the kind of mind that could guard a thing. When I was 26, my father told the family I had stolen from that fund. By 27, I had become the disgrace. The official story had been repeated so many times it had grown bones. Tressa got greedy in Nashville. Tressa forged access papers. Tressa drained Grandpa's fund when he was weak after his fall. Tressa was too proud to admit it. Tressa broke Bramwell's heart. Tressa did not even visit him before he died. It was a neat story because it gave everyone a place to put their anger. It let my father look wounded instead of guilty. It let Kellen look loyal instead of dependent. It let my mother stay quiet and call that peace. It let Aunt Bettine shake her head every Christmas and say, "Some girls get too much schooling and forget their people." And it let me learn, very young, that a lie told at enough tables can become a family tradition. The truth was uglier and slower. 9 years before that reunion, Grandpa had slipped from a scaffold behind the old community hall while repairing stone trim he had no business climbing at his age. He did not die then. Bramwell Mardell was too stubborn to leave this world because of a cracked hip and a broken wrist, but the accident changed the weather in our family. He could not drive for months. His hands trembled when he wrote. He needed help with banking, calls, appointments, and the fund. My father stepped in quickly, too quickly, with a new briefcase and serious voice. He told everyone Grandpa needed rest. He told me not to worry, that he had the accounts handled. I believed him for exactly 12 days. The first thing that did not line up was a thank you card. A girl named Juniper Voss, who had received one of Grandpa's scholarships for welding school, mailed him a note saying she understood why the second half of her award had been delayed and hoped the family was okay. Grandpa showed it to me with confusion clouding his face. "Delayed," he said. "I signed that check." I looked at his desk. The blue ledger was closed. The fund folder was gone. When I asked my father about it, he smiled like I was being difficult in a familiar way. "Bank changed some procedures," he said. "Nothing for you to pick apart." I asked to see the statements. His smile died. "You work in claims, Tressa. That doesn't make you a banker." Grandpa was in the next room, pretending not to listen. I remember the sound of his walker scraping the floor. I remember thinking, there is something under this floorboard. A week later, I came by after work with groceries and found Kellen's truck parked behind the house. He owned an outdoor supply store then, Mardell Ridge Outfitters, though owned is a generous word for a business that stayed open mostly because creditors got tired before my brother did. He sold boots, fishing gear, tents, and the idea of himself as a man who knew the land. He was in Grandpa's dining room with my father, papers spread across the table. When I walked in, both men moved at the same time. My father closed a folder. Kellen stood between me and the table. "Family business," he said. I said, "I am family." He laughed, not loud, just enough. Not the kind that stays. That was the first time I understood they were practicing a story before they told it. I found the withdrawal copies 3 days later because my grandfather asked me to take his old tax receipts to a filing cabinet, and I saw my name where it should not have been. Authorization for disbursement. Temporary fund access. Tressa Mardell. My signature, or something wearing its skin. The letters were close but not mine. The T leaned wrong. The pressure was too heavy on the last name. Whoever copied it had used an old birthday card or a driver's license sample and thought that was enough. The amount was $186,000 spread across several transfers. Some had gone to vendor accounts I did not recognize. One went to a company whose billing address matched the back office of Kellen's store. I stood in Grandpa's hallway with the copies in my hand and felt the strange calm that comes when fear becomes evidence. I did not run to the family screaming. That is important. People like my father survive by making the first angry person look unstable. So I took photographs, wrote down dates, and asked him quietly that night, after dinner, where the fund paperwork was. He stared at me for a long time. "You always needed to be the smartest person in the room," he said. I told him my name was on papers I had not signed. His expression changed then, not into guilt, not exactly, more like irritation that a locked door had rattled. "Careful," he said. "A daughter can do damage to a family with accusations she can't prove." I said, "So can a father." That was the last honest sentence we said to each other for nearly a decade. 2 nights later, the family was called to Grandpa's house. My father said there had been a serious matter involving the education fund. I remember my mother wearing a blue sweater even though it was warm, pulling the sleeves over her hands like a child. Aunt Bettine sat stiff-backed in Grandpa's rocker. Kellen leaned against the mantel with his arms crossed, already injured by whatever performance he was about to give. Grandpa was not in the room. My father said he was resting and could not handle the upset. Then Royston Mardell took out copies of the papers with my name on them and told the family I had abused Grandpa's trust, moved money, and refused to explain where it had gone. I said the signatures were forged. Kellen lowered his head like he could barely stand my shame. Waverly, who was only his girlfriend then, whispered, "Oh, Tressa," like she had been personally disappointed by the weather. I asked to see Grandpa. My father said no. I asked for the bank originals. He said I had already done enough. I looked at my mother. She stared at the rug. There are silences that are empty and silences that make a choice. Hers made one. Aunt Bettine said, "Your grandfather put his whole life into that fund." I said, "I know. That is why I would not steal from it." My father slammed his palm on the table. "Do not use his name to clean yourself." That was the line that did it. Not because it convinced them. They were already convinced. It did it because it took Grandpa from me in front of everyone. By the end of that meeting, I had been asked to leave, not by Grandpa, by the son speaking for him. For the next 5 months, I tried to see Bramwell Mardell 11 times. I counted because numbers were easier than feelings. The first time, my father met me on the porch and said Grandpa was asleep. The second time, he said Grandpa was angry. The third, he said, he does not want thieves at his bedside. After that, I called instead. My calls went unanswered. I mailed letters. They came back unopened, returned to sender, in my father's handwriting. I drove by once at dusk and saw Grandpa through the front window, smaller than I remembered, sitting under the yellow lamp with a blanket over his knees. I almost walked up. Then my father stepped into the room and pulled the curtain closed. That was the night I understood cruelty does not always shout. Sometimes it simply closes fabric between two people who love each other. What no one in the family knew was that I kept helping anyway. Not because they deserved it, because Grandpa did. When I learned he needed a ramp built off the side porch, I paid the contractor through a third-party invoice. When his physical therapy rides became too expensive, I set up billing under a community care account. When he needed a safer shower chair, bed rail, and medication dispenser, I paid for them through a local medical supply store and told the clerk not to use my name. My father accepted all of it because pride is less careful when help arrives without a face. He let the family believe he had arranged everything. I let him. I told myself that someday I would have proof, or Grandpa would recover enough to ask for me, or my mother would find the courage to tell me what was happening. Hope can be foolish and still be the only food you have. Grandpa died in October after the first frost silvered the creek grass. I found out from a cousin's voicemail because no one from my immediate family called me. At the funeral, my father gave the kind of speech people praised for weeks. He talked about honesty, sacrifice, and the pain of betrayal. He said Dad had one heartbreak in his last year, but he met it with grace. He did not say my name. He did not have to. Every eye in that chapel found me. I sat in the back row with my hands folded tight enough to hurt. When the service ended, I stepped toward the casket. My father moved into my path. "Let him rest," he said. "You did enough while he was alive." I wanted to tell him about the ramp, the rides, the shower chair, the letters returned to me. But grief is a public room with bad acoustics. No one hears the truth there if the lie has already taken the microphone. So I left without touching my grandfather's hand. After that, I became what they needed me to be, the disgrace the cautionary story. The girl who moved away and thought she was better. The one who stole, denied it, and stayed gone. For a while, I fought it in small ways. I sent Aunt Bettine a copy of my work travel schedule, proving I had been out of state on one of the signature dates. She mailed it back with a sticky note that said, "Let sleeping dogs lie." I asked the bank for originals and was told I lacked authorization. I considered filing a formal complaint, but the fund was private. Grandpa was dead, and my father had already buried the narrative deep enough that any fight would look like a guilty woman trying to rewrite grief. So I did something quieter. I rebuilt what had been stolen. Every December, the Bramwell Mardell Education Fund sent out less than it should have, but more than it could afford. I knew because I watched. A cousin's daughter received money for nursing books. A boy from the next county got help buying electrical tools. Another Mardell grandchild received a welding mask. My father stood at reunions and accepted thanks with a humble dip of his head. What no one knew was that the fund would have gone dry in 3 years if I had not started sending anonymous deposits under the name BM Legacy Account. At first, it was small, $500 when I could. Then more as my career grew. I worked overtime on ugly claims, skipped vacations, kept my apartment longer than I wanted, and sent money into the account that carried Grandpa's name, knowing the family would thank my father for it. Some people will say that was weak. Maybe. But when a bridge is built for children, you do not burn it down just because the wrong man is cutting the ribbon. By the time I drove to that reunion, I had put just over $72,000 into Grandpa's fund anonymously. I had proof of every transfer in a folder at home, not because I planned to use it, but because records are how I keep from going crazy. A clean record says, "This happened even if no one clapped." This was real, even if no one knew. And maybe that was enough until Waverly emailed me 3 weeks before the reunion with a cheerful subject line, "Legacy Fund Modernization." The message said the family would be voting to rename the Bramwell Mardell Education Fund as the Royston Mardell Legacy Fund to honor Dad's years of stewardship. It also included a consent form allowing the fund committee to restructure assets, broaden expense categories, and appoint permanent managing authority. I read the legal language twice, then a third time. Broaden expense categories. Permanent managing authority. Those words were not family words. They were doorways. I called the number listed on the form and got Waverly. She sounded pleased with herself. "It's just housekeeping," she said. "The fund needs to be less old-fashioned." I asked who drafted the language. She paused a half-second too long. "A consultant." I asked what assets were being restructured. She laughed softly. "You have been gone a long time, Tressa. You don't need to make everything suspicious." I said, "I do that for a living." Her voice cooled. "Then you should know your signature probably is not needed, but your presence would look nice. Dad wants family unity this year." Dad wants family unity meant Dad wants a public picture where the disgrace sits quietly while he takes legal control of what Grandpa built. I told her I would come. 2 days before the reunion, an old man named Vernon Quaid left a message on my work phone. I knew his name before I knew his voice. Vernon had been the Brackenridge Falls postmaster for 34 years and Grandpa's oldest living friend. When I called back, he said, "Are you still driving in Saturday?" I told him yes. He said, "Then stop by the old depot before you go to the pavilion. I have something Bramwell left for you." I did not speak for so long, he said my name again. My grandfather's name in his voice cracked open a room in me I thought had been sealed. I asked what it was. Vernon said, "A promise I should have delivered sooner, maybe. But your granddad was exact in his instructions, and I was taught not to argue with dead men who knew what they were doing. The old depot sat 1/2 mile from the reunion grounds, a brick building converted into a county history room with faded train photographs and a bell out front. Vernon was waiting on a bench under the awning, smaller than I remembered, his skin folded soft around sharp eyes. He held a padded envelope on his lap, both hands resting on it like it might try to leave. Your granddad gave this to me 6 weeks before he passed, he said. He said I was to hold it until Royston used his name in public to condemn you again, especially if money or the fund was involved. My throat felt tight. He knew. Vernon's face changed then, not with surprise, but with sorrow. Child, Bramwell knew more than any of them hoped he knew. Inside the padded envelope was a sealed letter, a small brass key darkened with age, and a business card from Marston Vale, an estate attorney in Knoxville. The letter had my name written on the outside in Grandpa's block handwriting. Not shaky, not confused, strong. Tressa. I touched the letters with one finger, and for a moment I was 16 again, sitting beside him at the kitchen table, adding columns while he watched with proud eyes. Vernon said, "You read it before the reunion if you need to," but he wanted the family to hear it from a witness if the day came. I asked why he had not called me after Grandpa died. He looked away toward the train tracks that no longer carried trains. Your father told me you had confessed and wanted no contact. I did not believe all of it. But I was sick that winter, and then my wife got worse, and time did what time does. I am sorry. It was not enough, but it was honest, and honest has its own weight. I sat in my car behind the depot and opened the letter with hands I did not trust. Grandpa began the way he always spoke to me, plain and steady. Tress, if you are reading this, then the lie has lived longer than I hoped, and I am asking you not to mistake my silence for belief. I know you did not take from my fund. I know your name was put where your hand never went. I know my son Royston moved money through forms I was too weak to challenge at first, and I know some of that money found its way to Kellen's store under false vendor entries. I know because I kept copies before they thought to move the ledger. I also know Royston told you I did not want you here. That was his second theft. Money can be counted again. Time cannot. I had to stop reading. I pressed the paper against the steering wheel and bent over it like pain had become a weather system inside the car. For 9 years, I had believed my grandfather died thinking I had abandoned him or stolen from him. I had built a life around that wound. I had learned to breathe around it. And here, in black ink, was the truth. He had known me. He had known me the whole time. That relief hurt almost worse than the lie. When I could read again, the letter continued. If they are hearing this after calling my girl a disgrace, then the disgrace is not the child who asked for records. The disgrace is the man who hid them. Behind my service medals in the pavilion case is the blue ledger and the bank copies Royston never bothered to look for because he always thought memory made poor evidence. It does not. Not when a man writes things down. There was more. Grandpa wrote that he had asked Marston Vale to notarize a supporting statement when his hand was still steady enough. He wrote that Vernon had witnessed the packet. He wrote that he was sorry for not being strong enough to stop Royston sooner. Then came the line, "I could barely survive." You did not leave me, Tress. You were kept from me. Do not let them use my name as a shovel to bury you. If the day comes, open the case. Let the beam carry its true weight. I folded the letter along the old creases and sat in the hot car with the engine off, listening to cicadas scream from the weeds. I did not cry loudly. I did not curse. I had spent too many years being controlled by other people's noise, but my hands shook so hard the brass key clicked against the console. When I reached the pavilion, the reunion was already moving in its familiar rhythm. Children by the creek, men around the grills, women arranging dishes while pretending that was not work. Someone had set up a display for Grandpa near the podium, his trowel, his cracked leather gloves, a photograph of him in front of the community hall, and the locked glass case built into the pavilion wall. Inside were his service medals from his father, his old pocket watch, a mason's line, and a few yellowed certificates. Behind those medals, if the letter was true, sat the blue ledger that could unmake my father in front of everyone. I looked at the case and felt an old instinct wake up in me, the professional part, the part that did not care who shared my blood. Evidence does not become less true because it is inconvenient at a picnic. My father spotted me near the display. His face tightened, then loosened into public kindness as he came over. "Tressa," he said, arms open enough that anyone watching would see a welcoming father. I did not step into them. He let them drop. "I wasn't sure you'd have the courage to come." "I was invited," I said. "You were included." He corrected. "There is a difference." He looked over my shoulder at the glass case. "This is a big day for your grandfather's memory. I hope you won't make it about old problems." Old problems. That was what he called a stolen fund, forged signatures, and 9 years of exile. I said, "I think Grandpa's memory can handle the truth." Something moved in his eyes then, quick, small, gone. "Truth," he said softly, "is a word people use when they want to reopen shame." Then he walked away to greet a cousin as if he had not just warned me in the shade of his father's pavilion. For the next 2 hours I watched. It was not hard. Being ignored is useful if you know how to use it. Waverly carried her clipboard from table to table, asking relatives to sign support forms for the fund modernization. She used words like continuity, flexibility, and stewardship. Most people signed without reading because family paperwork at a reunion feels rude to question. Kellen drifted beside her, joking, charming, placing a hand on shoulders, telling cousins how Dad had held the fund together after everything that happened. I saw one form up close when a cousin set it beside the lemonade dispenser. The language allowed the managing committee to approve business development grants related to community advancement. I almost laughed. Business development grants. Kellen's store had closed twice and reopened twice under slightly different names. My father was not just protecting an old theft. He was building a legal path to do it again. I took photographs when I could. A page left near the cake. A line on Waverly's clipboard. Kellen's business name faintly visible on a sample budget. My father's initials beside a proposed transfer category. I did not need much now that I had the letter, but I have never trusted one piece of proof when 5 will stand better. At one point, my mother came to stand beside me near the fans. Nerissa Mardell still had the soft beauty people mistake for goodness. She looked tired, older than 60, her mouth drawn small from years of swallowing words. "You look well," she said. I said, "You look like you want to say something." Her eyes filled and emptied quickly. "Your father wants today to be peaceful." "Did Grandpa want that too?" I asked. She looked at the glass case, then down at her hands. "Tressa, some things are too late." That was the saddest answer she could have given me. Not because it was true, but because she had used it as permission to do nothing. Near 4 o'clock, Royston called everyone toward the pavilion. The sun had shifted low enough to stripe the wooden floor with gold. People settled into folding chairs, paper plates balanced on knees, plastic cups sweating in their hands. The microphone crackled when my father tapped it. Behind him, the banner moved in a light breeze. Beside the podium stood the sheet cake with Grandpa's face smiling up from frosting, which felt almost cruel now. My father began with gratitude. He thanked those who drove from Kentucky, Georgia, and both ends of Tennessee. He thanked the women who organized food, though Waverly took a little bow as if she had cooked all of it herself. He thanked Kellen for helping carry the family forward. Then he placed a hand over his heart and turned toward Grandpa's display. My father, Bramwell Mardell, believed in work, honor, and the power of a good name, he said. The crowd murmured approval. My stomach went still. He talked for several minutes about the education fund. He said Grandpa had trusted him to protect it through difficult years. He said the fund had survived betrayal, hardship, and changing times. When he said betrayal, his eyes found me in the second to last row. Not long enough for anyone to call it an attack. Long enough for everyone to understand. He announced that the family would rename the fund to honor ongoing stewardship, and that the new structure would allow broader support for Mardell ventures, not just school expenses. Kellen nodded solemnly. Waverly held the clipboard against her chest like a hymn book. The words sounded polished, but under them I heard the scrape of that old floorboard again. Money moving, names shifting, a lie preparing to become paperwork. Then Cousin Dovie, sweet and careless, asked from the third row, "Does Tressa have to sign too?" The air changed. My father smiled sadly, and I knew before he spoke that he had been waiting for someone to open that door. "Tressa," he said into the microphone, "has made her position clear over the years." Heads turned. My mother closed her eyes. "Every family carries pride," he continued, "and every family carries pain. I have tried not to speak harshly about my own child, but sometimes silence protects the wrong person." He looked straight at me now. No more hiding behind general words. Some people come back to a family reunion wearing the family name like they did not drag it through the mud. A murmur moved through the crowd. Aunt Bettine leaned toward the woman beside her and whispered, "It is time someone said it." My father lifted his chin. My daughter Tressa is the disgrace my father died ashamed of. There it was, not hinted, not implied, spoken into a microphone under the roof Grandpa built. My hands did not shake this time. That surprised me. Maybe the shaking had ended at the depot. Maybe Grandpa's letter had steadied something deeper than bone. Around me, people went quiet in the hungry way crowds do when they know cruelty is happening, but want to see whether it will become entertainment. Kellen looked down, hiding a smile. Waverly's mouth softened with false pity. Aunt Bettine nodded once, satisfied with the verdict she had repeated for 9 years. My mother did not look at me. That was her last chance, and she spent it staring at the floor. I stood. The chair leg scraped loud enough to sound like a decision. My father stopped speaking. His expression warned me not to embarrass him. I walked down the center aisle between folding chairs, past cousins who had borrowed my name for gossip, past children too young to know why the adults had gone still, past the sheet cake with Grandpa's frosting face. I did not rush. A person who brings the truth does not need to run. At the podium, I took the folded letter from my bag and set it in front of my father. He looked at it, then at me. "What is this?" he said, not into the microphone now. I leaned close enough that only the first few rows could hear. "You have used Grandpa's silence for 9 years, I said. Now use his handwriting." His face changed. The public mask cracked just enough for me to see the fear underneath. He did not recognize the letter yet, but he recognized danger. "This is not the time," he said. I turned to Vernon Quaid, who had come quietly to the side of the pavilion and stood near the display case with his hat in both hands. "Mr. Quaid," I said, loud enough now, "Grandpa named you as witness. Would you read it?" The crowd shifted. My father said, "Vernon, sit down." Vernon did not. Old age had bent him, but it had not made him small. He came to the podium, took the letter, and adjusted his glasses with slow care. "Bramwell asked me to do this if Royston ever condemned Tressa in public using his name," he said. "I heard him do that, so I will keep my promise." My father reached for the letter. I moved one hand over it, not touching him, just blocking the motion. "No," I said. "You had 9 years to speak. He gets 5 minutes. Something passed through the crowd then, a change in balance. Not belief yet. Curiosity, doubt. The first hairline crack in a family story. Vernon unfolded the pages. His voice trembled at first, then steadied as Grandpa's words filled the pavilion. "Tress, if you are reading this, then the lie has lived longer than I hoped, and I am asking you not to mistake my silence for belief. I know you did not take from my fund. I know your name was put where your hand never went." A cousin gasped. Someone whispered my name. My father said, "That is enough." Vernon read louder. He read every line. He read about the false authorizations. He read about my father moving money under vendor entries. He read about Kellen's store receiving funds it had no right to receive. Kellen stood halfway up, face red. "That is not true," he said. Nobody answered him because Vernon was still reading. He read that Grandpa knew I had tried to visit. He read that Royston had told Grandpa I refused to come and told me Grandpa did not want me. My mother made a sound then, small and broken, but still not a word. Vernon read that I had paid for the ramp, the therapy rides, the safety equipment. That line hit the crowd differently. Theft can be explained away by people who want to stay comfortable. Secret care is harder to hate. People turned to look at my father, and for the first time in 9 years, they looked at him before they looked at me. Then Vernon reached the line that would live longer than any speech my father ever gave. "If they are hearing this after calling my girl a disgrace, then the disgrace is not the child who asked for records. The disgrace is the man who hid them." The pavilion went completely still. Even the creek seemed quieter. My father's mouth opened, but nothing came out. That was the first time I had ever seen him without a sentence ready. Vernon finished the letter with Grandpa's instruction about the brass key and the blue ledger hidden behind the medals. Then he folded the pages carefully, as if Grandpa might feel a crease in the next world, and handed them back to me. I took out the key. My father stepped in front of the display case. "Nobody is opening that," he said. He tried to make it sound like authority, but fear had entered his voice and changed its shape. I looked at him and thought about every porch he had blocked, every returned letter, every year he had eaten praise bought with my silence. "Move," I said. Just one word. Not loud. Not angry. A claims investigator's word. A granddaughter's word. He did not move at first. Then Marston Vale stepped from the side of the pavilion. He was thinner than I expected from his card, with a gray beard and a linen jacket despite the heat. "Royston," he said, "I notarized Bramwell's supporting statement. If there is a ledger in that case, destroying or concealing it now would be unwise. Lawyers can make a threat sound like weather." My father moved. The key turned with a small, stubborn click. The glass door opened. For a second, I smelled dust, old wood, and the faint metal scent of time. I lifted Grandpa's medals with both hands and found the blue ledger wrapped in a cloth behind them, exactly where he said it would be. Under it was a flat packet of bank copies, carbon slips, and a notarized statement bearing Marston Vale's seal. My father whispered, "Dad, what did you do?" It was such a strange sentence that I almost laughed. Even now, his first instinct was to feel betrayed by the man who had exposed him. I laid the ledger on the podium. The cover was faded, corners soft from Grandpa's hands. I opened it to the marked page. His handwriting marched across the lines with merciless patience. Dates, amounts, transfer references, notes. Kellen Ridge vendor account? Questioned R. Tressa signature false. Original not hers. Ask Vale. Kellen pushed forward then. "This is insane," he said. Grandpa was old. He was confused. The crowd did not like that. You can steal from a dead man in secret, but insulting him in front of people who loved him is a bad tactic. Aunt Bettine said, "Do not you dare." It was the first useful thing she had said to me in years, even if it was aimed at my brother. Kellen pointed at me. "She works with documents. She could have made that." I opened my bag and took out copies of my anonymous transfers to the fund, my travel records from the dates of the forged signatures, and the signature comparison I had done years earlier, but never had enough authority to use. "I could have," I said, "but I did not need to. Grandpa already did the work." Marston Vale examined the ledger, the statement, and the bank copies with calm precision. "These records appear consistent with what Mr. Mardell brought to my office before his death," he said, "and I have the original statement on file." The word original hit the pavilion like a gavel. My father gripped the podium with both hands. Waverly had taken 2 full steps away from Kellen. I noticed because people show the truth with their feet before their mouths can catch up. My mother stood slowly. Her lips trembled. "Royston," she said, "tell me this is not true." He looked at her with sudden anger, as if her question was the betrayal. "You knew we needed money," he snapped. The whole family heard it, not a confession in clean words, but close enough to stain. Kellen was drowning. The store was going under. Dad would have let that fund sit there while his own grandson lost everything. Kellen said, "Dad, stop." But my father had finally begun to collapse, and collapse has its own momentum. "I was going to put it back," he said. "I was going to fix it before anyone knew." I looked at him. "You fixed it by making me the thief." That silence was different from the first one. The first had been a crowd waiting to see me bleed. This one was a crowd realizing whose hands held the knife. Aunt Bettine sat down hard. Waverly's face had gone pale, her clipboard hanging at her side. Cousin Dovie covered her mouth. A few of the younger ones stared at Kellen like he had turned into a stranger while they watched. My father looked around, searching for the old loyalty, but loyalty built on a lie does not survive daylight well. "She left," he said, voice weaker now. "She ran off and left us to handle it." Vernon lifted his head. "You kept her letters from Bramwell." Marston added, "And according to Bramwell's statement, you refused her entry multiple times." My mother's eyes finally met mine. There was horror in them. There was apology too, but apology that arrives after the house burns is mostly smoke. I could have taken the microphone then and said everything. I could have told them how many nights I sat in my car outside Grandpa's road. I could have told them about the returned letters, the ramp invoice, the children whose scholarships survived because I worked extra cases until my eyes burned. I could have told them what it feels like to lose a grandfather twice, once to death and once to a lie. But the ledger was open. The letter had been read. My father's own mouth had done the rest. I had spent 9 years learning that people who need you to scream will use your scream as proof. So I kept my voice even. The consent forms stop today, I said. The rename stops today. No broader categories, no business grants, no permanent control. I looked at Marston Vale. Can the fund be reviewed? He nodded. Immediately. I looked back at my father. Grandpa's name stays where he put it. Royston stared at me like I had become someone he did not know how to command. You think you can just walk in and take over? He said. There it was, the old trick, turning protection into greed. I shook my head. I do not want your seat, Dad. I never did. I want the money accounted for, the false records corrected, and Grandpa's fund protected from the people who already stole from it once. Kellen flinched at stolen. Good. Some words should land hard. Waverly whispered, Kellen, tell me you did not know. He did not answer fast enough. That was answer enough for a marriage, maybe for a life. She set the clipboard on a chair like it had become dirty and walked toward the parking lot, calling for her children. My father tried one last time to gather the room. Family handles family matters inside the family, he said. It would have worked years ago. It had worked for most of my life. But Grandpa's letter lay open on the podium, and the old blue ledger sat under my hand. The dead had entered the room with better records than the living. Cousin Dovie stood first. My daughter got a scholarship from that fund, she said. I want it reviewed. A man from the Georgia branch said, So do I. Aunt Bettine's voice came from the front row, brittle and shaken. Royston, did you let me call that girl a thief all these years? He did not answer. She covered her face. I did not feel sorry for her exactly. I felt the heavy sadness of watching someone discover they had been useful to a lie and had enjoyed the usefulness. The reunion broke apart without anyone announcing it. People stood in clusters, whispering with sharp faces. Children were pulled away from the creek. The sheet cake melted untouched. My father remained near the podium, smaller than he had looked an hour before. Kellen followed Waverly toward the parking lot, talking fast, his hands moving in desperate circles. My mother came toward me, then stopped 3 feet away like there was glass between us. Tressa, she said. My name in her mouth sounded unfamiliar. I waited. She cried then, quietly, which would have moved me once. I did not know all of it, she said. I believed her. That was the hardest part. She had not known all of it because not knowing had been easier than asking. But you knew enough to look away, I said. She lowered her head. Yes. It was the first honest thing she had given me in 9 years, and it was not enough, but it was a beginning of something that did not belong to me to carry. Marston Vale took custody of the ledger for copying and review, with Vernon and 2 relatives signing as witnesses right there on a folding table still sticky with lemonade. I watched every signature. Old habits. The fund forms Waverly had collected were gathered and sealed in a grocery bag because no one had thought to bring an evidence envelope to a family reunion. There was something almost funny in that. My father had dressed fraud in ceremony, and it ended in a plastic bag beside a bowl of coleslaw. Before I left, I walked to Grandpa's display case and placed the brass key on the podium beside his letter. I did not need to keep it. The door had been opened. The secret had done what secrets should do when they have been used long enough, become record. My father called my name as I stepped off the pavilion. Not disgrace, not thief. My name. I turned because I wanted to hear whether he could say anything true without being forced by paper. His face was gray. Why did you not tell me you had that letter? he asked. I almost laughed, but it would have been cruel, and I was tired of cruelty wearing family clothes. Because you did not need a letter to stop lying about your own daughter, I said. He looked down as if the ground might offer a better answer. I was protecting Kellen, he said. No, I told him. You were protecting yourself. Kellen was just the excuse you loved best. That landed. I saw it. But I did not stay to watch it settle. The legal work took months. People like clean endings, but real ones arrive with forms, calls, statements, and arguments over what words mean. Marston Vale filed a petition to remove my father from managing authority over the fund pending review. The family committee was rebuilt with outside oversight, something Grandpa would have grumbled about and secretly approved. Kellen's business transfers were examined, and several were classified as misappropriated fund payments disguised as vendor reimbursements. Restitution became a word my brother had to learn. Waverly moved with the children to her sister's house in Chattanooga, while she decided how much of Kellen's life had been built out of other people's money. Aunt Bettine called me once and cried so hard I could barely understand her. She said she had repeated the lie because Royston sounded so hurt when he told it. I said hurt is not evidence. She said she knew that now. I did not comfort her. Some lessons should not be softened by the person who paid for them. As for my mother, she wrote letters. Real ones. Not returned, not filtered through my father. I read them slowly. In the first, she said she was sorry. In the second, she admitted she had been afraid of losing her marriage if she challenged him. In the third, she wrote that fear had made her a witness against her own child. That sentence mattered, not because it fixed anything. It did not. But because it named the thing correctly. We had coffee once in Nashville at a place near my office. She looked nervous sitting across from me, like I was the judge and not the daughter. Maybe I was both by then. She asked if I could ever come home for Thanksgiving. I told her I did not know. Then I said, I can sit with you. I cannot sit under a roof where my pain is treated like old weather. She nodded. For once, she did not ask me to make peace easier for everyone else. My father waited 13 days after the reunion to call. I let it ring the first time. The second time, I answered because some part of me still needed to know what kind of man remained after the lie lost its shelter. He did not apologize at first. He breathed. He cleared his throat. He said my name. Then he said, Your grandfather loved you. I closed my eyes. I know that now. He said, I told myself I would put it back. I said nothing. I told myself you would survive it because you were always hard. There it was. The family translation of strength into permission. I said, I was not hard. I was unsupported. He was quiet a long time. Then he said, I do not know how to undo it. I looked at the wall of my apartment where Grandpa's pocket level rested on a shelf. You cannot undo it, I said. You can stop doing it. He asked if I would manage the records for the fund, at least until the review ended. I agreed, but not for him. For Grandpa. For Juniper Voss and the cousins' children and the trade school students who needed a bridge more than they needed the Mardell family drama. I became temporary records custodian, unpaid and watched by an outside accountant, because I wanted no one to say I took anything. Every deposit was logged. Every scholarship was voted on. Every check had 2 signatures. Grandpa's name stayed on the fund. The first award after the review went to a girl studying diesel mechanics in Knoxville. Her thank you note said, This money makes me feel like someone I never met believes I can finish. I kept that note in my desk. It felt like Grandpa speaking in a new voice. The next summer, I went back to the pavilion alone before reunion season. No banner, no food, no microphone. Just the creek, the cedar beams, and dust turning in the afternoon light. The display case had been cleaned. Grandpa's medals were back in place, but now beside them, under glass, was a copy of his letter and a small card explaining that the original ledger was preserved with the fund records. Marston had asked if that was too public. I said no, not because I wanted my father shamed forever. Shame is a poor foundation. I wanted the lie to have nowhere dark to grow again. Some families protect their history by polishing it until no fingerprints show. Grandpa taught me better. A true beam can bear weight because it is true, not because no one sees the knots. I stood under the roof Bramwell Mardell built and read his line again. Do not let them use my name as a shovel to bury you. For 9 years, they had called me the stain on the Mardell name. Grandpa's letter did not wash me clean. I had never been dirty. It only showed them whose hands had been covered the whole time. I wish I could say the truth gave me my family back. It did not. Not in the way stories like to promise. Truth is not a magic door. Sometimes it is a window, and all it does is let air into a room that has been closed too long. But air matters, breathing matters, my name matters. So when people ask what I did after my dad called me a disgrace at the family reunion, I tell them the simplest version. I let Grandpa answer him. I let the letter speak. I let the ledger open. And when the room finally saw the lie for what it was, I did not beg for love from people who needed proof before they could offer basic decency. I protected what was worth protecting. I set down what was never mine to carry. Then I walked out from under that pavilion lighter than I had walked in. If someone in your family ever used silence to make you look guilty, tell me in the comments. I read them. And I promise you this, being quiet was never the same as being wrong. Sometimes the quiet ones are not hiding shame. Sometimes they are just waiting for the right letter, the right witness, and the right moment for the beam to finally carry its true weight. Commentary, discussion, explanation, and lessons. Now let's slow down and talk about what we just heard, because this story is not only about one family reunion, one angry father, or one hidden letter. This story is about what happens when a family builds its comfort on a lie and asks one quiet person to carry the cost of that lie for years. Tressa's story feels painful because the damage did not happen in one loud moment. It happened slowly. It happened through small silences, closed doors, returned letters, fake smiles, and people choosing the easier version of the truth because it protected them from asking hard questions. That is why this story hits deeply. It is not only about money. It is not only about forged signatures. It is about reputation, love, memory, and the terrible pain of being blamed by the same people you were still trying to protect. At the beginning of the story, we see Tressa standing at the family reunion like a guest in her own bloodline. That image matters. She is not outside the family by law. She has the same last name. She grew up with these people. Her grandfather built that pavilion. But emotionally, she has been pushed to the edge of the table. Her name card is at the end. Her father speaks with a microphone, and she is expected to sit quietly while he controls the story. This is a very real kind of family power. Some families do not need to lock the door to make you feel unwelcome. They simply give everyone else a place and leave you standing there, wondering why you came. Tressa came because she knew there was still unfinished truth connected to Grandpa Bramwell's name. She did not come looking for drama. She came because the lie had started moving again, and this time, her father was trying to turn that lie into official paperwork. One of the strongest parts of this story is the way Royston uses public respect to hide private wrongdoing. In front of the family, he looks like a serious father, a responsible fund manager, and a man protecting his father's legacy. He talks about honor, roots, family pride, and Grandpa Bramwell's name. But behind those words, he is trying to control the education fund, rename it after himself, and create a path for money to support Kellen's failed business again. This is important because many harmful people do not introduce themselves as villains. They speak the language of duty. They say they are protecting the family. They say they are keeping peace. They say they are doing what is best for everyone. But when you look at the documents, the dates, and the behavior, the truth is different. Royston's biggest weapon is not only the forged signature, his biggest weapon is the family's trust in his image. Tressa's pain is also different from simple anger. She is not just upset because the family believed she stole money. She is broken because her father made her believe Grandpa died ashamed of her. That is a crueler theft than money. Royston did not only steal from the education fund. He stole time between a grandfather and granddaughter. He stole final visits. He stole goodbye. He stole the comfort Tressa should have had after Bramwell died. For 9 years, she carried the idea that the one person who knew her best had turned away from her. That kind of lie changes a person. It makes you question your own memories. It makes you wonder whether love was real or whether you imagined it. So when Grandpa's letter says, "You did not leave me, you were kept from me," that is the emotional center of the whole story. It does not erase the lost years, but it gives Tressa back something her father had no right to take, the truth of Grandpa's love. Another thing we need to notice is Tressa's character. She is quiet, but she is not weak. She is calm, but she is not empty. She is hurt, but she is not careless. That difference matters. Many people in the story misunderstand her calmness. Her father thinks she is cold. Her aunt thinks she is arrogant. Kellen thinks she is easy to blame because she will not fight like him. But Tressa's calmness is discipline. She works with evidence. She knows that if she explodes too early, the family will use her emotion against her. So she watches, records, waits, and lets the truth become stronger than the accusation. This is a powerful lesson. Sometimes the strongest response is not the loudest response. Sometimes the strongest response is gathering proof, understanding the situation, and choosing the right moment to speak. The family reunion setting is also important. A reunion is supposed to be a place of connection. It is supposed to remind people where they come from. But in this story, the reunion becomes a courtroom without a judge. The pavilion becomes the place where the family story is tested. Royston wants to use that space to shame Tressa again and gather support for his new fund plan. He thinks the crowd will protect him because it always has. But the same public stage he uses to humiliate Tressa becomes the place where Grandpa's letter exposes him. That is a strong reversal. He uses the microphone to bury her. She uses Grandpa's handwriting to bring herself back into the truth. This is why the reveal feels satisfying. The lie was public, so the correction had to be public too. Now let's talk about Grandpa Bramwell. Even though he is not alive during the main reunion scene, he is one of the most powerful characters in the story. His presence is everywhere. In the pavilion beams, the education fund, the ledger, the letter, the brass key, and Tressa's memories. He represents truth that was delayed but not destroyed. He knew his son had done wrong. He knew Tressa was innocent. He knew Royston had kept them apart, But he was old, injured, and running out of time, so he did what he could. He wrote things down. He placed proof where the family would not think to look. He trusted Vernon Quaid. He left instructions. This shows us something very important. When you cannot fix everything in the moment, you can still preserve the truth. Grandpa could not stop all the damage while he was alive, but he made sure the lie would not live forever. Vernon Quaid's role is small, but it matters a lot. He is a witness. In stories like this, a witness can change everything. For years, Tressa had her own truth, but the family refused to hear it from her. That is unfair, but realistic. Sometimes people ignore the person who was harmed because accepting their words would force the family to admit they were wrong. Vernon gives Grandpa's letter outside credibility. He stands up and reads it because Bramwell asked him to. His voice becomes the bridge between the dead man's truth and the living family's denial. This reminds us that silence from good people can help lies survive, but courage from even one witness can begin to break them. Kellen's character shows another kind of damage. The golden child who is protected so much that he never has to grow. Kellen is not only irresponsible, he has been trained by his father's favoritism to believe that someone else will always pay the price for his mistakes. His store fails, the fund money covers it. His name is connected to false vendor entries, but Tressa is blamed. He benefits from the theft, then acts offended when the truth appears. That is why his collapse at the reunion feels earned. He is not destroyed by Tressa. He is exposed by records. That difference is important. Tressa does not invent anything. She does not exaggerate. She simply opens the door to what already exists. Kellen's own choices are what make the room turn against him. Waverly also plays an important role because she helps make the new scheme look polite and organized. She carries a clipboard. She uses soft words like modernization and stewardship. She smiles while collecting signatures. This is a smart detail because not all betrayal looks messy. Sometimes it comes printed on clean paper with friendly language. Sometimes the most dangerous line in a document is hidden under words that sound positive. Broader support, permanent managing authority, family unity. These sound harmless, but in the story, they are tools for control. That is a lesson for real life, too. Always read what you are asked to sign. A friendly face does not make a bad document safe. Tressa's mother, Nerissa, may be one of the saddest characters in the story. She is not the main villain. She did not create the lie, but she protected it by looking away. That kind of character is painful because many families have someone like this. The person who knows something is wrong, but keeps choosing quiet because confrontation feels too hard. Nerissa tells herself she is keeping peace, but peace that depends on one person being falsely blamed is not peace. It is surrender. When she finally admits, "I did not know all of it," Tressa's response is powerful. "But you knew enough to look away." That line carries a major lesson. You do not have to know every detail of a wrong thing to know you should question it. Sometimes people hide behind incomplete knowledge because it gives them permission not to act. The story also shows how family narratives are built. Royston did not convince everyone with proof. He convinced them with repetition, emotion, and authority. He was the father. He was the son of Bramwell. He looked hurt. He sounded serious. So people believed him. Aunt Bettine repeated the story because it gave her a simple explanation. The cousins accepted it because challenging it would be uncomfortable. The family let one man's version become history. This is how unfair reputations are created. One person tells a story confidently, others repeat it. Years pass. Then the person who was harmed is told to move on because the lie is now old. But age does not turn a lie into truth. It only makes the correction harder. One of the most meaningful choices Tressa makes is that she does not take revenge by taking money. She does not grab control for herself. She does not say, "Now the fund is mine." She says the fund must be reviewed, protected, and kept under Grandpa's name. This keeps her morally strong. Her goal is not to become the new version of her father. Her goal is to restore what was damaged. That is why the ending feels mature. Real justice is not always about making the villain suffer. Sometimes justice is making sure the system they abused cannot be abused again. Tressa protects the fund with outside oversight, clean records, and clear rules. She does not want applause. She wants the bridge Grandpa built to remain safe for the students who need it. The letter reveal is satisfying because it gives Tressa back her name, but the story does not pretend everything is magically healed. That is another strong point. After the reunion, there are legal reviews, family calls, hard conversations, and emotional distance. Tressa's mother writes letters, but that does not instantly fix 9 years of silence. Royston calls, but he cannot undo what he did. Kellen faces consequences, but the damage has already spread. This makes the story feel more honest. Truth can free you, but it does not always restore what was lost. It gives you air. It gives you clarity. It gives you the right to stop carrying shame that never belonged to you. But it does not return every missed goodbye or every stolen year. Now let's take some life lessons from this story. The first lesson is that silence does not always mean guilt. Many people stay quiet because they are weak, but many others stay quiet because they are trying to survive a situation where every word will be twisted. Tressa was quiet for years, but she was not guilty. She was collecting herself. She was rebuilding the fund. She was waiting for proof strong enough to stand when people tried to push it down. So before judging a quiet person, we should ask, are they hiding something, or have they learned that this room is not safe for the truth yet? The second lesson is that a family can love its image more than its people. Royston cared about the Mardell name, but not enough to protect what Bramwell truly built. He cared about looking honorable, not being honorable. He cared about giving speeches, not living by the words in those speeches. This is a warning. A family name means nothing if the people carrying it use it to cover harm. Legacy is not a banner at a reunion. Legacy is what you protect when nobody is clapping. The third lesson is that documents matter when memories are being manipulated. Grandpa understood this. Tressa understood this. Royston counted on emotion and authority. Grandpa answered with a ledger. In real life, when something serious happens around money, care, property, promises, or responsibility, records protect people. Clear writing protects people. Receipts, dates, letters, and witnesses can stop a lie from becoming permanent. This does not mean we should live without trust. It means trust should not be used as an excuse to avoid accountability. The fourth lesson is that favoritism can destroy more than the ignored child. Kellen was protected again and again, but that protection did not make him better. It made him weaker. It taught him that failure had no real cost as long as Tressa could be blamed. Royston thought he was helping his son, but he was feeding his worst habits. Favoritism does not only hurt the child who is pushed aside, it also damages the child who is never corrected. Love without accountability becomes permission. The fifth lesson is that being strong does not mean carrying pain forever. Tressa was strong for 9 years. She rebuilt the fund. She kept records. She survived family shame. But the story makes it clear that strength has limits. At some point, she had to stop letting the lie wear her name. This is important for anyone who has been the strong one in a family. Being strong does not mean you must accept every insult. It does not mean you must protect people from the consequences of what they did. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is say, "No more. The truth stands here now." The sixth lesson is that delayed truth is still truth. Grandpa's letter came late. Very late. It did not save Tressa from 9 years of pain. But it still mattered. It changed the family record. It stopped the fund from being taken again. It gave Tressa back the knowledge that Grandpa loved her. Sometimes we feel that if justice does not come quickly, it no longer matters. But this story says something different. Even late truth can break a long lie. Even late truth can protect the next person. Even late truth can help someone breathe again. The seventh lesson is about forgiveness and boundaries. Tressa does not become cruel at the end, but she also does not rush to forgive just because people feel bad. Her mother apologizes. Her father shows regret. But Tressa understands that regret after exposure is not the same as change, so she creates boundaries. She can protect the fund without returning to the same emotional table. She can speak to her mother without pretending the past was small. She can hear her father's voice without giving him control again. That is a mature kind of healing. Forgiveness, if it ever comes, cannot be forced by the people who caused the wound. The eighth lesson is that the truth should protect the future, not only punish the past. Tressa uses the truth to protect the education fund. That matters. If she only wanted revenge, the story would end when Royston was humiliated. But she goes further. She helps create oversight. She keeps Grandpa's name on the fund. She makes sure students still receive help. This is a better ending because it turns pain into protection. It says, "What happened to me should not happen again." That is one of the highest forms of justice. When we look at this story as a whole, we can see that Grandpa's letter did not create the truth. The truth already existed. The letter only gave it a voice strong enough for the family to hear. Tressa's innocence did not begin at the reunion. She was innocent when they blamed her. She was innocent when they ignored her. She was innocent when she paid for the ramp and the rides. She was innocent when she sent anonymous money to keep the fund alive. The reunion did not make her clean. It made the family finally see that she had never been dirty. That is why the final line is so powerful. The letter did not wash her clean. It showed whose hands had been covered the whole time. So if you are listening to this story and thinking about your own life, maybe the lesson is not to wait for a dramatic letter or a public reveal. Maybe the lesson is to stop confusing someone else's story about you with the truth of who you are. Some people will call you cold because you ask questions. Some will call you difficult because you read the document before signing. Some will call you selfish because you stop paying for their comfort with your silence. But names given by dishonest people are not identity. They are tools. And once you understand that, you do not have to wear them anymore. This story leaves us with a quiet but strong message. Protect what is worth protecting. Keep records when the truth matters. Do not let family pressure make you ignore what your eyes can see. Do not confuse public respect with private honesty. And most of all, do not let anyone use a dead person's name, a family name, or an old wound to bury you under a lie. Tressa walked into that reunion as the disgrace in everyone else's story. She walked out as the person who had protected Grandpa's legacy when the so-called honorable people were trying to steal it. That is not revenge in the loud sense. That is correction. That is restoration. That is the moment when the beam finally carried its true weight. The end